Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome to episode 344 of Stand Up. I've got two excellent guests joining me today. For the first time ever, Nicole Lynn Lewis will join me. She's the founder of an awesome organization called Generation Hope and has written a great new book called Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. Also, the great Wajahat Ali will join me to talk about his latest at the Daily Beast, calling out both CNN and Rick Santorum, who created a firestorm last night when he was on CNN. We spoke, Waj and I did, before that happened, but I'll get to that later. I hope you're feeling good and doing okay, and always happy to check in with you. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast, Stand Up, Pete Dominic, daily here each weekday, talking to experts about the most important issues that affect you and your family, your community, your country, your planet. Leave a review for the podcast. That's one of the best things you can do outside of supporting it with a paid subscription. Thank you to Tootie Jane, who left a review on Apple Podcasts that says, "Great guests and discussion, 5 stars. Pete has such great guests and always asks the questions I would ask. Subscribe and support Stand Up with Pete on Patreon." Thank you, Tootie Jane, whoever you are, as well as GenuFix gave me 5 stars and the podcast 5 stars. Awesome listen. Very interesting guests, timely topics. Thank you, GenuFix. Go write a review over on Apple Podcasts. And let's do it, shall we? Let's get to it. The big news segment first. I call it the last 24. Everything that happened yesterday. Catch up. Lots of news to discuss. First, COVID headlines. CVS and Walgreens apparently wasted thousands of COVID-19 vaccines, more shots than most U.S. states, territories, and federal agencies combined, according to a new report. So much for the private sector can do it better, huh? That is a terrible headline. Out in Los Angeles, here's a good headline. They are reporting no new COVID-19 deaths for the first time in 410 days. California boasting the lowest virus rates in the country. That is huge news. Not too long ago, it was a nightmare out there. The FDA is set to authorize Pfizer coronavirus vaccines for those aged 12 to 15. New York City is going to begin a major reopening on May 19th, expected to be open fully by July 1st. The full subway service is set to resume May 17th. And the United States set another record for a number of air travelers since pandemic set in, although passenger numbers remain below 2019 levels. More than 1.6 million people were screened at U.S. airport checkpoints on Sunday, according to the TSA. Not sure how many of them were smuggling weed, but those are the statistics I'd really like to know. And speaking of the airlines, JetBlue is screwing us over because we didn't, apparently our tickets that we bought for our last year summer vacation expired, and now we can't get them back. Who else is having trouble being reimbursed or having their tickets reissued? If you are, email me because I want to do a segment about that. standupwithpete@gmail.com. So those are some COVID-related headlines for you. Oh, also, the governor of Florida, Rick DeSantis, has suspended all of Florida's remaining COVID-19 restrictions, calling it the evidence-based thing to do. Yeah, he's the king of evidence, basically, Rick DeSantis. A school nurse who said masks were harmful to students has been suspended. And speaking of schools, while I'm on it, did you know that in several states, I'm not sure how many, you can still hit a kid with a piece of wood? A Florida principal was filmed paddling a 6-year-old in an incident that the child's mother says happened without her consent. Yeah, I guess the law is that you have to give permission to a teacher or administrator to hit your kid with a piece of wood. But still, in the United States of America in 2021, you can hit a kid with a piece of wood in school. I mean, that's absolutely insane. Hi, Mrs. Dominic. Yeah, Pete has been acting up and acting out again, and we need your permission to beat him with a paddle. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to hit him 5 times. Yeah, sure, you do it. You beat the shit out of him. You do you. What is happening? In what culture and what country, what community, I mean, I don't even understand hitting your kids, period. I feel like we should be far evolved past that. This generation of parents, at least, maybe not our parents, But I mean, if you're in your 40s, 50s, like, come on. This is we're way past this. But even if you wanted to make an argument that spanking works or corporal punishment is good, outsourcing it seems a little bit. It seems too much. Yeah, go ahead. You can hit my kid. Who allows other people to hit their kids? Who are you people? If you know anybody that is okay with this, you have to give me their phone number so I can call them and record our conversation and share it with everybody. Okay, let me get to a few pieces of sound I've got for you today. I don't feel great about my selection of audio clips that I got for you today. I'm just one man, just me and my fake producer, Keith. But I got an email or a text actually from Martha, longtime listener, Martha Burns, who's the greatest, texted me yesterday and said that today's last 24 audio choices were so on point. That's for yesterday's show with Dr. Merton Running Wolf, episode 343. And yeah, yesterday I did like 40 minutes of news and clips, and there was some good stuff. But it was Monday. There's a little more better choices, I think, after the whole weekend. And so here we go. I'll play what I got, and some of them are just kind of infuriating / hilarious, if you will. I got a couple of Fox News things here for you, but let's start with the Secretary of Transportation. This one is good. It's always good when you hear from Pete Buttigieg, in my opinion. He was on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer trying to sell the Biden administration's infrastructure investments.
Well, we think that broadband is absolutely infrastructure in the 21st century. I mean, having a connection to the internet now matters as much as having that connection to the interstate highway system. Same thing with water. I mean, it's as simple as the fact that you need water to live. I mean, the word infrastructure, infra means beneath, and what's beneath our cities are water pipes that in too many cases have lead in them. So we believe these things are tightly connected with infrastructure. We see a lot of agreement around that. Now, we also see a lot of major bipartisan support among the American people for what we're seeking to do to improve our schools, to make sure that elder care is not a barrier for Americans wanting to be able to get through life and enter the workforce, to make sure that we're supporting families. To us, these things fit together. And we don't want to get too sucked into academic arguments over what label to put on what provisions. We want the focus to be on what's good public policy and how much consensus can we get around the good policies that are ahead.
There you go, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. I think it's a great conversation to have about all of this government spending and where it should go. I'm fascinated by every single part of it. I'm reading as much as I can and listening to and talking with policy experts who are so often very supportive of a lot of this spending. But it's definitely, I think, worthy to have a conversation and debate about what is this investment going to do and what is kind of infrastructure in 2021 and how much of this is a social restructuring of the social fabric or order of America when you're talking about, paying, helping families, helping parents, early childhood education, preschool, all of these things, I think, are really interesting and important investments and worthy of discussion in terms of priorities and what effect it's going to have on the economy and society and fighting poverty. Anyway, here is President Biden trying to sell it himself. He's out on the road now trying to sell the American Families Plan, standing in front of signs that say, "Getting America back on track." Here he is talking about why trickle-down economics has never worked.
Folks, trickle-down economics has never worked. For too long, we've had an economy that gives every break in the world to the folks who need it the least. It's time to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. We can choose to give hard-working families a break, a tax break in effect. We can choose to invest in our students. We can choose an economy that rewards work, not just wealth, and that chooses the choice I'm making, and the vast majority of American people support, is let's give people a shot. Given even half a chance, the American people have never, ever, ever let their country down. Imagine if we give them a full chance. Imagine what it would mean for them and their families and for our country. We're the United States of America. There's nothing we've been unable to do when we do it together. So let's get together. Let's get this done, because the truth of the matter is that we can do this and grow the economy. I won't go on all the other statistics, but the plan is estimated to grow the economy another $1 trillion.
All right, I agree with you, Joe, but step it up a little bit. Sounding a little Sleepy Joe in that clip. But here's another one, and this, I think, is really important. The president promised he's not going to be raising any taxes on anyone making less than $400,000.
The reason I'm bothering to do this is I keep hearing on the press Biden's going to raise your taxes. Anybody making less than $400,000 a year will not pay a single penny in taxes. And we will not increase the deficit either, unlike the last gigantic tax cut, which increased the deficit by $2 trillion. It's about balancing the system and growing the economy. It would mean wealthy investors no longer pay lower marginal tax rates than their secretary pays, their secretary in their office. Do you want to know what that would do? That would take that money and extend the life-changing middle-class tax cut and put it in place for American Rescue Plan and expand child care tax credit. I mentioned earlier that $1,700 in the pockets of family with 2 kids for now through 2025. Look, just closing these loopholes by taxing investment income at the same rate as wages for the wealthiest Americans would have enough to extend this again through 2025. So I ask again, is it more important to keep these tax loopholes for millionaires? They're good people, they're not bad folks. Or would we rather put $7,200 in the pockets of working moms and dads every year if they have 2 children?
How do we get middle class, brown, black, white folks to agree and realize that our interests are not the same as the wealthy and ultra and super wealthy folks? I'll be talking to Michael Mechanic, who's a senior editor over at Mother Jones, got a new book called Jackpot next week that covers all of this. Really looking forward to that. But if you have ideas on it, I'd love to hear from you. All right, well, Mitch McConnell doesn't love any of this, of course. He is the Senate Minority Leader, and here's what he has to say, the gaslighter in chief.
I think it's pretty safe to say the bipartisanship of last year is kind of broken down because my view is that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle just can't resist stretching out the pandemic, using it as a rationale for additional spending far beyond what is best for the country.
What? The bipartisanship of the Trump era? What is it? Come on, son. I mean, nobody did more to stretch out the pandemic than Trump and Republicans, who were against the most basic public health practices being recommended by every public health expert pretty much in the country, from masks to debunking other myths to social distancing. I mean, come on. I mean, the president was saying that it was just going to go away and it was never going to be that bad and it wasn't worse than the flu. And all you got to do is have a little bit of a bleach spritzer and you'll be better. So who really extended the pandemic? This is ridiculous. But what do you expect from Captain Gas? All right. Also, I thought this was an interesting clip. This is the former chairperson of the Iowa Republican Party. His name is Dave Millage, and he sounds pretty frustrated and exasperated about what has happened to his party.
Blind loyalty to Trump, worshiping at the altar of Trump. This is just mind-boggling to me that Republicans could be this way. This was a legitimate election. He tried to delegitimize the election. He was attacking American democracy itself, yet they're standing by him. It just astounds me. And I know a lot of Republicans feel like I do, that this was unconscionable conduct by Donald Trump. And let's not apologize for it. Let's say it for what it is and move on. He was trying to undermine our system of government. Well
said, former Iowa GOP chair Dave Millage. Although when he says it's mind-boggling and astounding, I'm not astounded by any. I've not been that surprised by hardly any of this, because if you've been watching politics closely for the last 10 to 20 years, none of it really has been surprising. The Republican Party has always been trafficking in conspiracy theories, always, and obviously flirting with racism and outright white supremacy. I mean, it's fair, I guess, to be surprised by how far it's gotten with a lot of these conspiracy theories and this cult of worship of one man, and that man being Donald Trump. But boy, I mean, a lot of the signs have always been there. So, all right, now let's get to the really crazy Fox News clips. Just some really brief ones that I want to share with you. First of all, I don't know the context of this. I just saw this like 10-second clip of Dana Perino on Fox News. Of course, she is former spokesman for the George W. Bush administration. But I just thought this was so rich with irony, given who she worked for and what they did while she was there at the White House.
It's as if, like, for comparison's sake, imagine that ExxonMobil was writing specific guidelines on climate change issues and giving it to a Republican administration at the Department of Energy, and they issued it.
I mean, we don't need to imagine it because it's pretty much exactly what you did during the Bush administration. You invaded an entire country because Exxon basically told you to. I mean, Dick Cheney was an energy guy. The Bush family were oil people. And the Republican Party has always been a fossil fuel funded political party. And they absolutely gave them millions of dollars to make sure that they all got government credits and subsidies. I mean, dig into the history. A few people were doing that yesterday on Twitter. It's pretty phenomenal that she said that, I thought. And now, when I worked back on CNN years ago, I first got hired to host a Man on the Street segment that I pitched, and we called it Pete on the Street. And I went to several different places all over the country and a lot in D.C. and, of course, New York City. And I asked people like kind of a question of the day. It was a great segment. It still holds up. I stand by it. And I like to joke around and act like I made up the Man on the Street idea. Of course, that was made long before I ever did it. But you go out, you talk to a few people, you edit the clips together, and you play it later, which is exactly what. So I did Pete on the Street on CNN. Here is Raymond on the road for Fox News. I don't know who this reporter is, and I don't care. But he's doing a Man on the Street segment, and they edited it all up, of course. But listen to this. This is pretty funny. I'm gonna keep my mic open. This is Raymond on the road for Fox News, and he's talking to old white people in Orlando, apparently.
If you had to rate Biden's first 100 days on a scale from 1 to 5 being the best, you would rate him what?
Suck.
Describe why suck.
It's un-American. It's absolutely un-American.
1.
Why?
Because I like Trump better.
Is that my only choice, 1 to 5? Because my real answer is minus to the infinite degree.
Minus to the infinite degree? I think he found a math teacher on the street, Raymond on the road did. This is amazing. 1 to 10. Suck. And here is on Hannity. Here's a very, very brief clip. Hannity had the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who did everything she could to kill her own people with COVID. And a big issue on the right, apparently right now, is they're mad because the federal government, the Secretary of the Interior Department, will not issue permission. It won't allow them at a national park, Mount Rushmore, to have fireworks on July 4th. And it's the perfect kind of grievance story for the right. They can't have fireworks in front of those 4 heroic presidents whose faces are carved into stone. They hate America. It's wonderful. Listen to this.
So the 4th of July, you went through every hoop, every environmental regulation. You did everything that was asked of you, and they won't grant you a permit for fireworks on the 4th of July. One
of the many important issues that they are analyzing over on Hannity. It's a perfect issue for them to make a big deal out of, because that matters, that whether or not there's fireworks at Mount Rushmore on the 4th of July. I mean, I think the main issue is that they don't want to burn down the state, but the governor has already tried to kill everybody with COVID. So why would you care about smoking those 4 great Americans on the side of Mount Rushmore? And the final of the Fox News clips I want to play for you, and trigger warning, it's Giuliani. Yeah, he was on Hannity as well. Another really important, hard-hitting issue that Americans should definitely not give a shit about. Well, I mean, Giuliani's legal issues, but not Giuliani's defense. Anyway, here it is.
And if you consider the fact that this guy Hunter was a drug addict from the time he was 20, it's disgusting that his father used him this way.
Oh.
His father is a complete crook.
Oh, wow.
And it is galling to be pursued by probably the most crooked man in the White House. And I know it. I've got the proof of it, and I am being persecuted because I brought it out. I have it.
And
here.
you're saying that there is more illegal activity that we haven't heard about. I want to ask a quick last question. You're saying that there is other stuff we will learn likely in the future. That
yes, yes, sir. If you would like to get a preview, go to my early podcasts, 1 through 8, where I put the evidence out.
If you'd like to, the whole thing was to promote Giuliani's podcast. I wonder who gets to work with Rudy Giuliani producing his podcast. That must be a real treat. I'm sure it's not a young woman who he harasses. Oh, man, that was great. Oh, God, I really hope that he gets arrested and goes to jail. All right, that's it. It's already just past 1 a.m. here, and I got to get to the news dump and post this baby for you to hear, because you're really here, of course, for the interviews. I had awesome conversations with Wajahat Ali and Nicole Lynn Lewis for the first time coming up. And by the way, I didn't get the clips from Rick Santorum, who I've been bashing for over a week now, including on yesterday's show and coming up with Wajahat Ali. He was on CNN for the first time last night, and Chris Cuomo, I think, did a terrible job with him. He tried very hard. They were screaming at each other, but I just didn't think it was the right line of questioning. I don't think Rick Santorum should, of course, be on the air at all, which is what I've been saying, and with what Waj and I talked about, and he wrote his column about. And then Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo were arguing about the whole thing, and I just didn't pull any of those clips because I just couldn't bear it. But that was a thing that did happen in the last 24. And also Tucker Carlson said some really convincing, scary things about that you need to be worried about the long-term effects of the vaccine for women, particularly based on nothing but a couple of anecdotes that women had said. And that was super upsetting as well. By the way, I heard something about Tucker Carlson in terms of why the Murdoch boys will never let him go, even if he has no advertisers because of advertiser boycotts, because he is so popular and his show is so important to viewers. And Fox News makes most of its money just getting carriage fees, being on all these different cable news providers and everywhere that they exist. That's where the bulk of their money comes from, apparently, not necessarily advertising. I mean, I knew that, but I guess I for some reason I thought that if he had no advertisers, he wouldn't be able to continue. And I don't know what his current situation is with advertisers, but who on earth would want to sell a product on his show other than Pillman? Okay, now it's time to get to the news dump. It's everything else that I've got for you rapid fire right now. Another jingle from listener Pete Coe. Let's go. And this jingle was inspired by our friend Karen Madison. Here you go.
Hungry piranhas swarm, form a great big clump. They're feasting on your flesh for today's news dump.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. That was horrible. It was so horrible that I was upset that I even played it until the end when we heard this part.
Today's news dump.
That does not sound like you're being eaten by piranha, that last part, but that's what made it really funny to me. Thanks, Pete. Love them. Keep them coming, buddy. I'll play every one. All right, let's start in Arkansas, where the governor there, Asa Hutchinson, on Monday decided to allow a bill that targeted, quote, critical race theory in state agencies to become law without his signature. The Associated Press reported that Hutchinson refused to sign the legislation, said that it does not address any problem that exists, but he did not attempt to veto it either. The legislation bars state agencies from teaching any, quote, divisive concepts during racial and cultural sensitivity trainings, including any concept that teaches that the U.S. is inherently a racist nation. This is something I want to talk a lot more about. I'm scheduled to be speaking with Tim Wise about this tomorrow. Been listening to a lot about this, getting ready to discuss and help you understand what critical race theory is and why I think, at least, it's very important that we learn it. Now let's head to Kansas, where a bill banning transgender girls from playing women's sports has failed after the state failed to override a veto from Democratic Governor Laura Kelly. And I think I heard somewhere, I forget where, that it was today on a podcast, I think, that there's only 2% of American high school students that identify as trans, and even less than that, smaller percentage than that are athletes that want to play sports. This is such a dumb issue. And it really, I mean, it's important to the people who are involved, but there's just so few people. Again, they are banging a drum about an issue that really, it doesn't matter or doesn't exist. It is not causing any problems, and I just can't understand why anybody's talking about it. Well, I mean, I understand why they're talking about it, because it's divisive, it gets ratings, helps politicians get fired up, and just another log on the culture war fire, but it's just so stupid. A petition asking government for monthly $2,000 stimulus checks has passed 2 million signatures. How about that? Oh, and of course, the big story yesterday is that Bill and Melinda Gates had decided to divorce. And one thing I heard, and I don't know if this is true, that they decided they had to put out a statement because there was some concern about global markets if there were rumors that they might divorce. But the reaction to that announcement has been very interesting. And because of it, because of Bill and Melinda Gates divorcing, Mackenzie Scott's name was trending because, of course, she is like the richest woman in the world as a result of her divorce with Jeff Bezos and now Melinda Gates. I don't know. I guess that's why it was trending. Who knows? It's an interesting story. Apparently, one report is that Bill came home and found Melinda Gates with a MacBook. And apparently, that was the final one. Melinda, how could you? Is that Bill Gates or Mr. Frilly from Three's Company? Belinda! Jack! Cindy! Sorry. All right, so 50-pound Ice Age mammoth bone has been discovered in Florida. I love this story. I think this is great and important. An amateur paleontologist found the 4-foot, 50-pound bone last week while scuba diving in the Peace River in Arcadia, Florida. The bone belongs to a species called the Columbian mammoth, which roamed the earth between 2.6 million and 10,000 years ago. I love that. Oh, I saw this sad news. I'm a huge Conan O'Brien fan, and we learned yesterday that he's going to say goodbye to his late-night TV show after a 28-year run on June 24th. That sucks. But love Conan. We'll follow him wherever he goes. At least one FBI agent opened fire on an armed man outside CIA headquarters in Virginia on Monday, authorities said. The suspect was shot and wounded after he emerged from his vehicle with a weapon around 6 p.m. Kind of interested in that story. Why was an FBI agent at CIA? Did they protect the CIA? What was he, just walking out? I thought they hated each other. I'm making stuff up. But anyway, I thought that was... And how did he get so close to the CIA headquarters? I mean, it's kind of hard to get close to the facility. I have no idea what happened there. I have many questions. I just wanted to mention that story, which is what I do here in the news dump in case you want to look deeper into any of these things. This is an interesting story. I saw this at the Washington Post. The U.S. saw fewer April tornadoes, the fewest tornadoes in April since 2000 in the United States of America. I'm good at reading news. After the busiest March on record for tornadoes in Alabama, April proved to be the most quiet for twisters nationwide since at least 2000. A preliminary count suggests only 73 tornadoes touched down throughout the month, coming at a time when tornado activity is usually ramping up as the spring severe weather season approaches its peak. Contributing to this year's comparatively tame April was a jet stream pattern unfavorable for widespread severe weather and storms. And while in America we're fighting over teaching the actual history of discrimination and abuse and horrifying crimes against black bodies, in Mexico on Monday, they marked the anniversary of a battle from 1901 that ended one of the last indigenous rebellions in North America by issuing an apology for centuries of brutal exploitation and discrimination. How about that? Mexico marking the end of the last indigenous revolt against the Mayan people with an apology. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe a memorial, a wall, and laws, and reparations. We could talk about it. But first we have to admit that it happened, and it was terrible. And that terrible things are still happening each and every day, and they're systemic. Sorry, I'm ranting. This is the news dump. Let's get back to the headlines, folks. And this will be the final one. Tyson Foods and Beyond Meat are facing off with new plant-based burgers. Ain't that a sign of the times? Tyson Foods is the biggest U.S. producer of animal meat by sales, and now they have introduced their first plant-based products in 2019, but they're adding stuff. They're burger patties, bratwurst, Italian sausage, and, quote, ground meat made from pea protein to its offerings, according to a statement. Do you eat these? Do you try these? My wife has gone almost completely vegan on us, and so I had a vegan sloppy joe the other night, which was absolutely delicious. So check it out. Let me know what you like. And that is today's news dump. All right, folks. That is a lot of news for you in a half an hour, and if you listen at double speed, just about 15 minutes. Speed and a half, just a little bit more. Anyhow that you listen, I appreciate it. Please subscribe, write a review, and support me with a paid subscription on Patreon at patreon.com/PeteDominic, or just click on the paid subscription link in the show notes. Okay, so now I want to get to my first guest. Well, first, coming up for the first time, Nicole Lynn Lewis will join me. She is a woman who has founded a nonprofit as well as written a book based on her own kind of life experience, and knowing that what she went through is so very, very common and unfortunate, that if you get pregnant as a young woman, as a teenager, that it just derails your entire life for so many reasons, especially because it makes it very difficult to get a college education. And that's what happened to her. And we had a great conversation, and that's coming up. Her book, Pregnant Girl, story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. Nicole Lynn Lewis, that is coming up. But first, a conversation with my good friend Wajahat Ali. We talked just before Rick Santorum made waves when he reappeared on CNN with Chris Cuomo last night. And Don Lemon got mad at Chris Cuomo, and it was a whole thing. Look into it. But more importantly, Waj didn't get his contract renewed last year, and Rick Santorum is still on CNN, and it's a disgrace. It really is. I've called it out. He's called it out. And now he's written a piece at the Daily Beast about it, which I highly recommend you read. It's linked to in the show notes. It's titled, What Does It Take to Get a White Man Fired from CNN? I always love talking to Waj. So easy to get in a conversation with him and have a conversation with him. We talked for about half an hour, and then my interview with Nicole Lynn Lewis is up after that. But here we go right now on Twitter at Wajahat Ali, New York Times contributor, Daily Beast contributor, all around brilliant guy. He's got a new book coming out. Let's do it.
Hello, hello, hello. I always love your cotton candy 1960s psychedelic shed. It's awesome.
It is a great place to be and work, but sometimes I feel alone, and that I should be interacting like I should be at a workplace. After working in corporate media every day, 5 days a week, it's serious. And I'm like, should I be with people? And then I think about like writers and artists, and like, no, this is my shed. This is what I do. And I justify it in my own mind.
This is Pete in a shed. You're a man with your shed, inside your shed, at peace with your shed.
Yeah, I think so.
And there's no reason why you can't do the same glorious work in your shed that you were doing in the fancy schmancy, serious New York studios that I visited when you had that show. But look, you're doing the same thing, and you have autonomy, and you're happier, I'm assuming.
For the most part, yeah. Outside of the benefits that any corporate company gets, in terms of insurance or 401k, and my salary was really high there. But at the same time, that stuff ends. That's corporate right. Media, especially, which is what we're going to talk about. It ends for almost everybody except for Rick Santorum and Tucker Carlson, who I learned.
And Wolf Blitzer will literally die in that chair.
I'm recording
while doing like a 12-hour emergency broadcast.
I'm recording, but I don't mind saying I heard a rumor. I don't remember who told me, but I do remember thinking it was like from somebody who would know. Because I worked there as well for a long time, CNN. That Jeff Zucker was told when he came in that Wolf Blitzer and John King are untouchable. I don't know what that means. That doesn't mean anything, but it's just a funny thing to think that they kind of have tenure in corporate cable news.
Well, actually, the reason why they probably said that is when Zucker did come, right? He moved from NBC to CNN. CNN at the time was lagging in ratings. And at that time, everyone was like, well, who's Zucker going to let go? And he came in, and like what happens with any regime change is he just let go of a lot of talent, including at that time, Soledad O'Brien and some others. And then he brought in new talent. And the joke at Wolf, I met him once. He was very nice, but that's the joke with Wolf. I even joked with him about it when I met him. I said, like, I feel like you live here. And he just laughed. He goes, and then he walked away. And then people are like, yeah, he does. Literally. If you need a human body to literally talk to America for 14 hours in any crisis, a Wolf Blitzer will just appear.
He laughed and then just walked into his bedroom at CNN.
yeah, and slept. He goes, don't wake me up until my show.
One of the things, though, about corporate media, no matter who you are, you're getting, if you're working there, you're getting paid probably pretty good money for being on air. Now, I'm not talking about all the producers and stuff. And what it does is it creates a certain comfort zone. You mentioned Soledad O'Brien. She's been great about criticizing it. Your piece at the Daily Beast criticizing CNN is great. But the point, and then you have a recent tweet saying, I guess I'll never work at, CNN again. and I think that's the truth, is that, and we've talked about this a lot, is that the money's good and the exposure's really good. But what it creates is no matter who you are, a kind of censorship where you want to say something that you know is right, but you hold back at least a little bit. And I think that you didn't really do that very much, if at all. I don't know when you did, but certainly even the best of the best, our friends at MSNBC, are almost never going to criticize their colleagues at NBC. And, that's just one example. The point being, it's really never a place where you can be 100% honest about anything from criticizing capitalism to white supremacy and any other sacred cow that we've never really felt comfortable that we could say, because we could lose that cushy job. That's the most I'll talk.
You hold your punches. You hold your punches because it's a cushy job. You'll lose a cushy job. You'll be seen as being trouble. You'll be seen as being controversial. You won't get invited back. The cushy job gives you the pay, because one of the most coveted jobs in media or media journalism is that commentator reporter job on CNN or MSNBC or Fox, right? There's just a handful of slots and there's a whole bunch of us. And then you get that contract for a year or two and you pray to God that they renew that contract and you get the money, probably as an independent contractor, but it's good side money for many people. It's enough money that you need literally for your year. Like you just come in 3 times a week, and if you don't have a wife or kids, if you and I were making that money as single men in our 20s, oh my God, I'd be ecstatic. But it's also, that
money is also, and they tell you this when you accept it, is also, the gig is also going to get you other money in terms of the exposure that gets you. You can get speaking fees, writing fees, book fees, it just builds your...
You put it on your LinkedIn profile, right? Yeah. And so then it becomes, okay, I've somehow lucked into this lucrative gig that everyone else wants. And everyone is rightfully asking, how did this mother effer get it and I didn't? Yeah. And now I'm being paid well. And if you play the cards right, maybe they'll renew you and you could keep this gig. But if you play the cards wrong, then you'll be removed and you'll never come back. And then word will spread. And then you'll have to switch over to MSNBC and it's like we audition with 500 other people. And let me just play it right because this is so good. Yeah. And now I have some savings, but I really want to say something, but should I say it? But oh no, I got warned and I might piss off someone who's powerful and I might piss off corporate America. And then I'm going to get hit by the right wing outrage machine or the left wing outrage machine. And so what it does, it fuels this interesting ecosystem and economy, right? Where I don't know if it benefits our journalism or truth. I don't think it does at the end of the day, right? You and I were part of it and I tried my best. I appreciate you observing. I really tried my best to keep it real. I tried my best to be as honest and sincere, as authentic as I could. I was blunt to the point where I was saying things that I really didn't think were that blunt. And people were like, oh my God, you said that on TV. I'm like, well, what else do you want me to say? That's the truth. But I know for a fact people hold their punches and they say, we'll just Trojan horse it and we'll get our licks in when we can. But other than that, we'll play it safe. That's the reality.
Yeah. I don't, if you're being honest, I don't think anybody that's ever worked in the machine at any of the networks could say otherwise. I just don't buy it. I wouldn't buy it. And the ultimate, of course, is hoping that at some point, you're describing the kind of the trajectory of someone in cable news. At some point, you'll be the in-studio anchor. And once you get that job, That's it, because that's the job you really protect, because obviously the money's great, the exposure's great, but it's just you don't have to go anywhere. Like, you just sit there in the studio, and people don't talk about that. That's a great job. Having to travel around and do reporting. You probably, hopefully, you did it to get there, but it's the greatest job. Who are you most surprised that like got let go? I'm putting you on the spot. You probably can't think of anybody, but I often think about the fact that they got rid of David Gregory and Chuck Todd's in that seat, and it's like, that guy can do nothing wrong, apparently. I mean, are you ever really surprised when someone does get let go because they seem to have a pretty good deal?
Yeah, Brooke. I thought Brooke would be there forever, right? Brooke Baldwin. Yeah, Brooke Baldwin. And as it goes to your point, is that gig is so cushy. And do
you think she got let go? I mean, I've never seen her say that they let her go.
Well, they didn't renew her contract. Right. So let me be accurate. She wasn't fired. They didn't renew her contract. But let me combine both points here. It's what happens is it's the pinnacle. It's the apex. You reach the top. There's literally nowhere else you can go if that's what you are climbing towards. So once you get there, it can be its own paralyzing straitjacket that reinforces the same thing that you and I were talking about 3 minutes ago, that you're like, oh my God, I have nothing left. This is it. So instead of me pushing things forward or being a bit edgy or being blunt, no way, because I've worked 10 years to get to this point, and I can hold on to this for 10 years, maybe 15, then retire, right? The thing is oftentimes when you get to that position, not everyone, but some people get lazy. Because like you said, it's a good gig. You sit there, you got producers, you got writers, and you're like, the rating's good. And you see some people just get like Fat Elvis, right? Not everyone, but some. Yeah. And then at the same time, you get lulled into a sense of security. But this business, like life, is so brutal, especially this business is so fickle, that just like that, they're like, you're too old. We want someone hotter. Yeah. We want someone younger. And then Brooke Baldwin, the reason why I was surprised was not only was she very well liked, and she had that, afternoon anchor spot where, you didn't really have to fight too much for ratings. She also was Don Lemon's partner on the very popular, beloved annual New Year's Eve party where both of them get drunk. And America tunes in to see Don and Brooke get drunk. And Brooke is a blonde white woman, and America loves blonde white women. And then Brooke, boom, contract's not renewed. And you're like, why? Why is her contract not renewed and like another person's? And it puts the fear of God in a lot of commentators and a lot of anchors. And then what it does, and instead of making people more bold, it makes people more terrified and self-censored.
The only thing that is really good about cable news is its reach. That's the real good thing. And it's the only reason why I still will watch even network news or listen to it, most likely, while digging mulch. Because they're going to get the national security advisor, and I want to hear him or her. They're going to have even if someone, Isabel Wilkerson, someone that's you don't hear a lot, is somebody who's written a book and it's hard to book. And so you get a lot of you do get great, interesting interviews and guests on those networks, which is why you listen. But I do think the podcasts and everything that's fragmented, YouTube, everything, is so much better because we can have a conversation like this where you don't have to worry about any of that. And you're really at the will, in my case, of the subscribers. You don't have to worry about advertisers. You don't have to worry about corporate hierarchy, relationships that you had with this executive or that. All of those things I worried about at SiriusXM, CNN, MSNBC. And so what do you think about the future of media in terms of the conversations that we need to be having about the issues that matter the most and where we're going? Because I do see the future is in alternative media, if you will.
It's really concerning to me in a way also is because of lack of trust in journalism in particular. The fact that 70% of Republicans believe in the big lie that Biden didn't win, the fact that disinformation is being promoted actively and deliberately by both the right wing and hostile foreign actors, the fact that the social media was supposed to connect us, but instead has created more silos, and the fact that people just, don't trust cable news that much anymore, right? Or they go to their own cable news, and because things are being so extreme now that even Fox News isn't right-wing enough, people need their Newsmax and their One American News Network, right? And you've seen the ratings go down for CNN, and you've seen the ratings go down for even the daytime talk shows now, right? So I think what's going to happen is people say, okay, I don't trust it anyway. I'm going to go to the quote-unquote alternative space, the real truth for the left or for the right, where people can say what they want to say. I'm going to go to Substack, and I'm going to go to the Patreons and the Pete's. This is great. For one reason why it's great is because you want to diversify the media landscape, right? I think you could agree with corporate media people pull their punches because just a handful of corporations own the vast majority of media channels and what we get to digest, number one. The problem, though, in this kind of wild, wild west of media is, what about editors, and what about standards, and what about regulations, and what about guidelines? And that's where, despite all their faults, right, with the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, I was going to say Fox, but not anymore. At least there's some, they have journalists there. They have people with some training and reporting and some ethics, and who will correct the story and the record and get the facts right. When it's a free for all, then it's like, whatever, I'm going to feel my facts. And even if people are egregiously wrong, the audience just doesn't care. Look at right-wing media. They're like, I don't care, because it's the left that make mistakes. And so that's my concern with Substack also, is that everyone's been telling me to join Substack, but I'm like, yo, man, I like editors.
No, I think you make a lot of really good points, especially for writers that are really detail oriented in print. I mean, even talkers like this, I would love for someone to, absolutely be editing and helping produce and coming up with ideas and pushing back on my horseshit. I think it's a great and fine point. So there has to be some kind of a happy medium and some kind of moderation of things.
That's right.
Where you're able, and you like to think that you listen to, in my case, your subscribers or listeners, to try to get a lot of that. But I want to get to your piece at the Daily Beast, which is really fantastic. And kind of interesting because I wrote this tweet, which I didn't even think about writing it much. I'm not that good on Twitter. I'm not a monster like yourself. And, most of my tweets don't go, real big retweets and quoted tweets, and yours generally do, even the smallest things. And we can try to unpack why that is. But basically I wrote, now I can't find it, of course, that I was really upset that CNN let you go, didn't renew your contract, but they still have Rick Santorum on. And that tweet went for days and days. And I couldn't quite figure out where the passion for that and anger for it was. And I think to some extent, people didn't know that your contract hadn't renewed. Like, they learned that, or it seemed like maybe they probably thought this happened at the same time. He just had his contract not renewed. And look, Rick Santorum just made these horrible comments. That doesn't really matter, but I do wonder why you think people are so outraged over the Santorums of the world, and why you wrote this piece, which is, a pretty risky thing to write if you want a future in corporate media, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that tweet was so nice of you. I mean, and you just wrote it without telling me. And I think what the tweet was, he goes, I'm really, really upset that CNN didn't renew Wajahat Ali's contract, but decides to keep Rick Santorum. That's it. And it got viral. It lived for a week, had 15,000 likes. I was shocked. And I was like, good. And I remember I texted you about it. I'm like, what do you think happened? And I think exactly what you said is, I think you said some people didn't realize I was gone. And because people don't, look, if you're not in the media, you see people and then you don't see people and you think, okay, whatever, they're probably taking a break. No one knows the intricacies of contracts. But I think but mostly the fact that Rick Santorum said what he said in that speech, and it was so historically inaccurate, so offensive, literally white nationalist talking points about birthing a nation, European white colonizers who came here, and there was quote unquote nothing, apparently nothing. And even the Native Americans, they didn't really influence our culture that much. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, so wrong, so revisionist, so dismissive that people eventually, I think they've come into a point where they're like, why have we tolerated Rick Santorum? And by we mean CNN. And I think there's a rage building towards CNN. You guys let go of Reza Aslan. You guys let go of Octavia Nasser. You guys let go of Brooke Baldwin. You guys let go of Mark Lamont Hill. You guys let go of Kathy Griffin. But this mother effer is still here, and nothing. You guys didn't say a word. And Stelter didn't say anything, and Darcy didn't say anything, and CNN PR didn't say anything. And meanwhile, you got Acosta and all these other folks doing great work talking against Tucker, but nothing against Rick, whom you pay six-figure salary. I think there's this palpable anger, which is really fascinating, that, by the way, a week on, people are still pissed. This has not gone away because CNN hasn't addressed it. And so I was inspired to write this article that I should have written. And this goes back to our point, right? Maybe I did hold my punches. I should have written this article last year. I should have written this article while I was working at CNN. Why the double standard? Because this ain't Rick Santorum's first F up. And he has a history of saying horrible things against LGBTQ, Muslims, pretty much everyone. He gets paid. And he comes on and he promotes disinformation. I debated him all the time. I was always nice to him. He was nice to me. But then Reza called Trump a piece of shit, and he was gone. They canceled his show. Lamont Hill, gave a talk at UN where he said, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. He gave it context. It wasn't enough. 2 days later, he's gone. Octavia Nasser was gone. And so I just said in words what people of color and commentators of color and people in the media like you and me have been talking about off the record in the WhatsApp groups. Why is there a double standard in cable news, especially CNN, for white conservative men? And voila, I wrote it. I shared I spilled some chai, talked about the 4 warnings I got during my year, which are hilarious.
Yeah, that's really
and I kind of just put it all in one article. And people, I've been really pleasantly surprised by the feedback. Like, people have been reading that even
What
today.
are you hearing? What has been the response to this article at the Daily Beast? What does it take to get a white man fired from CNN? And there have been, I guess, a couple. Jeffrey Lord comes to mind. But and I'm talking about contributors, not anchors. I can't think of anybody. I mean,
But look what Jeffrey Lord had to do. Jeffrey Lord literally used to come on and offend everyone. He literally used to come on and make excuses for Trump. He literally used to come on and lie. I remember Anderson Cooper one time lost it on an evening show and said that if Donald Trump took a dump on the desk, you'd probably say it smells like flowers. And then Anderson Cooper, which was hilarious. And then Anderson Cooper the next day had to come apologize. Jeffrey Lord finally got fired after he said Hail Hitler on Twitter. In response to a troll, right? That's what finally did it. So in order for Jeffrey Lord to finally get fired, he has to say Hail Hitler. But for the rest of us, we just have to fart in the wrong direction. Or get on the right wing outrage meter, and then that's what happened. These campaigns, a campaign got Reza out, a campaign got Octavia out, a campaign got Mark out. They tried for the entire year to get me out. And I said in the piece that if you're a person of color and you are being pummeled by the right wing media outrage machine, you're doing something right. You're succeeding. You're being eloquent. You're being incisive. You're getting under the skin because by the amount of hate they direct at you like a blitzkrieg. But they were never able to get me out, but I got 4 warnings.
It's hard to quantify or measure who's more powerful, the left or the right, in terms of wanting someone to be fired, calling for someone to be fired, calling for a boycott of advertisers or so on. It is hard to quantify that, but I can't help but think that the right is more powerful, or that and I don't have the metrics, but it would take 1 million kind of liberal or left-leaning people screaming over and over for someone to be fired, and it would take 100 people a few days over and over to get some liberal fired on the right, to get someone liberal fired. And that's why I look at the CNNs of the world and be like, no, I do think that in many ways they lean right because of this type of a choice, having someone as extreme, and he is very extreme, Rick Santorum on. But more importantly, the right constantly complain about cancel culture. They're very powerful at doing it themselves and have been at all these names that you just mentioned. Those were all.
I think we can clearly say it's the right that is more powerful. There's nothing comparable on the left. Look, Chuck Todd, every weekend they say get Chuck Todd off. Nothing happens. Rick Santorum for years, nothing happens. But Donald Trump was great for business. Donald Trump was invited on, cable news. Les Moonves on CBS said Donald Trump's bad for the country, but he's good for us. Yeah. Right. And based on the right wing outrage machine. Sorry, I got my kids in the back. Hopefully you got, based on the right wing outrage machine, they fired James Gunn from Guardian of the Galaxy, right? They fired Mark, they fired Reza, and Reza says that they fired him, and I think he's right, is because basically Jeff and Trump were friends. It was early on in the administration. They wanted access, and Trump was threatening potential access. He said, get rid of this guy. And they're like, you're out, Reza. What is comparable on the left? Show me anything.
I mean, not in the last I can't think of anything. And
I can't think of anything, right? Yeah. Nothing. And what CNN wants and what CNN thinks, and this is what's incorrect, is we keep catering to the right wing because they want to give the appearance that they're balanced, and they want to have access to the right wing, Republicans, and they want to have access to the right wing power. And they think, we have to keep this image of us of being balanced. At what cost, Pete? And does it matter? Because you put Rick Santorum on there. Guess what the right wing says about you? You're fake news. Guess what the right wing says about you? You're scum. Guess what the right wing says about you? You're enemy of the state. Guess what the right wing says about you? Your lies and propaganda. Look, what are you gaining? And look at the cost. The cost of us tolerating this is disinformation. false equivalency, both sides. And so that's where I feel like CNN, MSNBC, they really have to make a decision, man. Are you on the side of democracy and truth? Or are you on the side of enabling authoritarianism and white nationalism?
Yeah, and then you mentioned white nationalism, white supremacy, and you have been talking about that since I met you. You've been writing about it, talking about it, and been way ahead of so many other people in the way that you talked about it. And I think that's a big problem for still right now, obviously, for big corporate media, as well as for, obviously, Congress and so on. But I wanted to just ask you what you thought of Tim Scott's comments, and subsequently we've heard from Kamala Harris and the president. Is America a racist country? Is that too simple of a question? Does it deserve an easy answer or a long, more thoughtful answer, Waj?
It deserves a thoughtful answer, but how can you say no? And Tiffany Cross just utterly murdered Tim Scott. So I won't get in there, but you should go see Tiffany Cross's 2-minute. I
tweeted yesterday, I almost thought this was too mean.
Yeah, like I felt bad. You want to throw in the towel for Tim Scott. You're like, oh my God.
She said Harriet Tubman would have left him behind. I'm like, I don't know if she would have. I don't know if she would, if Harriet Tubman would have. Maybe that's too mean. I don't know.
It's like Harriet Tubman's like, nah, not everyone gets to go. But look, how can you say that America is not a racist country when we had 4 years of President Trump? A president who was incapable and unable to condemn white supremacy from the dais, a person who told the Proud Boys, which is now considered an extremist group in Canada, to stand back and stand by, a person who said that brown and black people come from shithole countries, a person who promoted anti-Semitism, a person who promoted conspiracy theories, a person whom literally white nationalists said is our guy. And right now, while the Republican Party is openly and nakedly and shamelessly promoting voter suppression bills that remind people of Jim Crow. And by the way, literally right now, our law enforcement is trying to purge white supremacists from law enforcement.
Well, trying is in quotes.
Yeah, trying. Trying is doing a lot of work.
I'm sure there's been some small efforts around the edges.
And literally when black people are being shot and killed by police in the streets, right? And
like you could start with asking every cop to take his shirt off and let's look at the tattoos. Let's just start.
Yeah. Do you have a 3%er tattoo? You can be a cop. Sorry. The bar is very low. So that's what I'm saying is like, and it shows you the shameless, desperate attempt to cancel the 1619 Project. That shows you right there. This inability and unwillingness to confront the reality of America and how America was made. Because if you confront it, if you talk about it, you have to talk about white supremacy. You have to talk about white supremacy as the foundational myth, legend, narrative of America, how it still exists, how it still benefits some people over the other. And what happens while you do that, Pete? It kills everything else. It kills meritocracy. It kills pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. It kills the whole myth of the welfare queen. It kills this nonsense about economic anxiety. It kills everything. And so Eric Erickson, I remember one time when it came to last year when the 1619 Project was going, he goes, if we accept that racism was so foundational to America, it destroys the American dream. And the rest of us are like, yup. It destroys your version of the American dream where anybody can come and if they just work hard and pull themselves up from their bootstraps, they can make it. Because then you have to talk about misogyny, white nationalism, anti-black racism, right? Inequality, inequity. And not only do you have to talk about it, then the next question is, what are you going to do about it? And what happens if you don't want to do anything about it because the system benefits you because of your skin color?
It destroys the American dream. Eric Erickson, peace be upon the prophet. You've been tweeting about this. I think this is important. I just want to ask you about it here at the end. What is the Washington Post is hosting Senator Josh Hawley for something?
And they gave him a glowing, like, in the profile promoting it. It was like very just laudatory. And it's like, what do you gain? Why are you hosting Josh Hawley? What will you gain from hosting a man who is unrepentant in his attempt to cancel the election, to spur on a violent mob that killed 5 people on January 6th and has been nothing but an obstructionist and a racist? Like, what do you get? Like, why? Really? Do you really need Josh Hawley that bad that you're going to give him a lucrative platform? Why don't you give that platform instead to, I don't know, give it to Ilhan Omar. I don't know if they've given Ilhan Omar a platform like that before.
I mean, it just, I feel like it erases, and I've been worried about this since the 6th and since the big lie started and had all these Republican support in it and still are, that we have to be very careful that we don't allow them to be normalized.
That's right.
and not forget what they did. And some Republicans are saying things like, I saw on the Sunday shows over the weekend, we want to move past Trump. We want to move past the insurrection. And it's like, we're talking about democracy. We're talking about how our elections work, and we're talking about faith in them. And if you're still saying, or if you still believe, if you don't deny that the election was not rigged and it was free and fair, then the damage will continue to be done. You have to tell your people the truth.
We're forgetting that Nikki Haley said, let's get over it. And Tucker Carlson tried to gaslight, right? They were doing that in January. Yeah. And the question is, will we let them do it? And it seems like some people will, because January was just a couple of months ago, man. That was like 4 months ago that insurrection happened. We still haven't had a commission. We're still doing investigations. We're still doing indictments. We still don't know how far it went up, right? And we're not going to get a commission on it because the people who are the defendants are also the judge and the jury, right? So you're not going to get that type of 9/11 bipartisan commission, unfortunately, to review it. I think they should just dump the Republicans and do it. That should be. I mean, that's what I said. That's what I've been saying for throughout the entire Biden administration is you're not going to get anything from Republicans. Yeah. You just go all in. And so this is what they're going to do. They're going to try to make us forget about it. They're going to successfully, I think I talked about it on your show. They're going to successfully run on cancel culture. They're going to successfully run on trans kids. And they're going to get a lot of folks on their side. And so the Democrats really need to be I agree with James Carville when he said this, that Democrats should come on every single day, on every single show. And no matter what they're talking about, cancel culture, the environment, infrastructure, say, oh, and by the way, Republicans did a violent insurrection that killed 5 people and tried to cancel the 2020 election. Like that should be the final thought, like every single day. And that's what the right wing is really good at. They take a couple of talking points, they drill it nonstop into the heads of their viewers. They repeat it all across the ecosystem, which is why, fast forward, Benghazi still evokes an emotion.
Ramadan is still happening?
Yes, sir.
As you're tweeting about the fast, the only way I know is because of your Twitter feed, and you're tweeting about fasting. Because I just don't have day-to-day interactions with Muslim people. And so
I'm the only Muslim Pete Dominic knows.
No, I know a lot of Muslims. I just don't talk to them enough to know. Like, it's the kind of, like, my relationship with any Muslim is kind of like, hey, is Ramadan still going? And
they're like, that was 8 months ago. They're like, you survived. Good for you.
How long so you don't eat till dinner time? Is that the deal?
Man, these are tough, man. Maybe I'm getting old. But I think due to the weather and climate change in the summer, it's lunar calendar, right? So it shifts 11 days. So right now, let me tell you when I stop eating. I stop eating around 4:35 a.m. And then because it's getting shorter. So meaning in the sense that it used to be 5 a.m., but it's like 4:40, 4:38. And then the Maghrib, which is sunset, is getting longer. So instead of it being 7:55, now it's 8:04. So it's all going in the wrong direction.
So what are you doing? You mean you stop eating it? Are you up at 4 a.m. and eating?
So some people sleep and get up. I'm just up doing I'm cramming this book and these
that's more articles. Of a Waj thing than a Muslim thing, right?
Yeah, this is more of a Waj thing. Okay. This Waj is crazy. But if most normal humans, they'll go to sleep, they'll get up to eat, they'll go back to sleep. I'm already up, so I just stay up like a freak. I'm already exhausted.
What is it about? I like to make fun of the religious and their commitment. What is it doing for you? Fasting, the Ramadan.
No. Ramadan. So basically, this is a good saying that it says if you do Ramadan for 30 days and all you get is an empty stomach and a parched throat, you're doing it wrong. Right? It's supposed to be a ritual, but a discipline, a spiritual discipline. That's the main thing. It puts you in a Ramadan state of mind. And for me, it puts me in a Ramadan state of mind, right? There's a discipline to it, which I'm used to now. I've been doing it so long that I just get tired, but it's not painful. But you're supposed to work on your anger. You're supposed to be a better person, more honest, more charitable, more decent, right? And there's something about knowingly being hungry for the day for a spiritual discipline. It puts you in that state of mind. It gives you that intention. And so things that would probably trigger me or set me off, I'm like, it's Ramadan, And so you get better. You pray more, you meditate more. You have a month. It's better for your community. People are generally more just decent. They give food to those who need it. They're nicer to their family members. In a strange way, it's actually a very beautiful month because it makes people appear like they are on their first date. Like, you know?
Oh, yeah, I get that. That's great.
Let me be like good. Let me be decent. Let me be like nice. Let me like hold my tongue a little bit. Like, you know, let me like the first 2 dates. And sometimes you get like your third crabby date because you're so hungry. But that's how it is. Like Ramadan's like you being on your first date for the whole month.
Man, that is a great sales pitch. I'd almost want to convert. That's very interesting. I like it. All right, bud, I'll let you go. I really appreciate you talking to me. I think this is a great piece. It's linked in the show notes. Everybody should go read it. Subscribe to the Daily Beast. Subscribe, follow Waj on Twitter, and join me whenever you want and more often and everything. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. See you next time.
There you go, everybody. There he goes. Wajahat Ali. Follow him on Twitter. Read his latest piece at the Daily Beast, and I've linked to it in the show notes. And get ready for his new book. Very excited about that. Always great talking with him. Let him know that you heard him on the show and that you loved it. That makes my day every time I see those kinds of tweets. Thanking the guests for joining me here in the shed. All right, so next I've got a first-timer here on Stand Up. She came highly recommended by trusted folks who I always listen to, which is many of you. She's the founder and CEO of an awesome nonprofit called Generation Hope, and her new book is titled Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. So great. I love this conversation. I love this book. It's such an important issue, which she discusses, shares her own personal story, and does this work each and every day. Her website is NicoleLynnLewis.com. The book comes out today. You can follow her at Nicole Lynn Lewis. Oh, and towards the end of the interview, this really funny thing happens. Basically, my internet just went out. I think my wife unplugged it or something like that, and I lost her for a moment, and I got her back, and I decided not to edit that out as I normally would. I mean, that I don't think has ever quite happened, but you always have all kinds of glitches, because I just thought it was funny what happened next, so that happened. You can hear that at the end, which is fun, because we had a couple of laughs, and we start with a laugh right now from Nicole Lynn Lewis, and here we go. I am very excited to have Nicole Lynn Lewis on the program for the first time, not only to talk about her excellent new book I've just told you about, but also to talk about her organization, her nonprofit, and her own story. Nicole, congratulations on your book, Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. What a huge achievement. I'm reading it. When you were little, you were writing books, and now when you're big, an adult, you actually published one. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing to bring it into the world, so I'm really excited about it.
What came first, the work, the advocacy, or the book?
That's a really good question.
Did you always want to write a book? Yeah.
So, I think many people, you see an author with a book and you think it happened overnight. This was a long journey for me. I started probably 12, 13 years ago trying to get this book into the world. And when I first shopped it around to literary agents and publishers, people said, no one wants to hear about a teen mother being successful. And, you don't have a platform. And those two things made it so that it was really difficult to get it picked up. And
now, what kind of person are you? Because you've got blurbs on this book from heavyweights like Soledad O'Brien, Wes Moore, the former Secretary of Education. You're being interviewed by heavyweights like John Dickerson and lightweights like me. So do you go back to those publishers, those people, and be like, hey, are you a vengeful person?
I'm not a vengeful person, but I do hope that they see now that maybe they could have made a different decision way back then.
Have you always shared openly your story? If people wanted to hear about it, did you tell your story? Because I think it's so important that you use yourself as an example and your own life story to educate people about the larger issue. Were you always open about it?
Always. I always felt like it was important for me to talk about my journey. One, first and foremost, because I never wanted my daughter to feel like she was something that I was ashamed of, that she was, our journey was something I had to hide. I wanted to make sure that she never felt that way. And then as I got older and I started sharing my experience more and more, people were just so amazed by it. And we're like, you have to talk about this. You have to put this out into the world. And so it's always been something that I've been really open about.
Well, we all are better for it, and that you've put it all in this book. But I do want to talk a little bit about your story right now. You're a little younger than me, but grew up in the Northeast, and you read about Massachusetts winters and different neighborhoods. But when you were fairly young, you moved to a neighborhood where there weren't many black folks. Your parents, you're interracial, but you identify as black. I mean, tell me a little bit about your family history, and then when you moved to this community and why that changed everything.
Yeah, so my mother is white, my father is black, was raised in a home where race was not something that we shied away from talking about. I remember watching Eyes on the Prize with my dad growing up. And so, we always had these really honest conversations about race. And the world has always seen me as a black woman. And that's something that I think, my parents made sure that I was aware of. And also, I've always been aware of myself. We lived in predominantly white neighborhoods in New England. And not only were we often the only black family, but certainly the only interracial family in those communities. And I felt that. I felt definitely that I was othered in those environments.
Was there a reason given for why you lived in those neighborhoods? Did your parents talk about, this is why we live in this neighborhood and not that neighborhood? I mean, I would think that since you were dealing, waking up in that color skin every day in that white neighborhood, that was probably a conversation that happened a lot for you and your sister, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was an intentional decision necessarily. Like, we lived in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and I think in large part it was a suburb that my parents could afford. And my dad was, commuting into Boston every day. And so they had to find a suburb of Boston that wasn't astronomical. And we just landed in Attleboro, for example.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood that you read about, some of the struggles that you had, and then we get to your adolescence, because you're really honest about all of that, and it's so important. Your story is so important, obviously, to the larger story and the issue that you dedicated your life to making better, to changing, and to start with creating awareness. So, what was your childhood like?
There were so many good things about my childhood. I was raised by two parents who were college educated, who were passionate in their careers, who taught my sister and I to value education and to be passionate about the things that we really cared about. But there were also really difficult things. I grew up in a home with a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. And I think for me as a child, it created a real feeling of instability and insecurity that, I could never really rely on anything, because in a moment, things could change and things could, go south. And I think that really created a feeling of wanting to be anchored in something early on as a child.
By the way, just a little of a sidebar. I feel like people who have parents that are from kind of different cultures, different ethnicities, even different religions, if it weren't for all the discrimination and marginalization and the horror that can obviously present in a pluralistic society, have a lot of benefits. It's like, you just mentioned that growing up, your dad always had jazz playing. It's like growing up, we didn't have a lot of music, much less, predominantly pretty white music, or the soundtrack of E.T. for some reason. We had that album. But it is interesting. If you just talked about the benefits of living in a multicultural family, that makes you so much more kind of equipped to so many situations to be able to see life through different eyes. I mean, I always thought that was such a value of Barack Obama, that he had these different families that he could identify with, and he could speak to different cultures. How much of a benefit, in a way, if not for all the horror that we see in America as a result, is it to be raised in a family like yours, to be you?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I learned so much from my dad, just his experience as a Black man. He was in the Peace Corps for a couple years in Nigeria, and I was raised, enjoying and appreciating West African cuisine, and fufu and like all sorts of incredible food. And then on my mother's side, was exposed to her artwork and her passion for that. We would go to art museums, and she has a French Canadian kind of background, and so I grew up learning French. So I feel like there were a lot of benefits to being raised in a biracial family. Yeah,
you can talk about a lot of things just based on your own personal experience.
Yeah.
Maybe we just do like 2 hours on that one day. But let's get to the book, Teen Mom and the Issue, because you were a teen mom. And when we hear that word, that phrase, we all arrive at so many different assumptions and conclusions and prejudices. But it's absolutely different when we're talking about the white teen mom and the black teen mom. The statistics are different and so many outcomes are different. But most importantly, the assumptions, prejudices, and conclusions are different. Let's talk about your adolescence and how you became a teen mom. Sorry for that kind of cheesy way of getting to the question of your pregnancy.
No. Yeah. I mean, if you would have asked me in high school if I thought that was where I was going to be my senior year, I would have said you're crazy.
Right.
And I probably had the same prejudices and stereotypes that so many of us have when it comes to teen parents and teen pregnancy. And yet here I was in my senior year of high school. I'd just been accepted into a bunch of different colleges. I had, a stack of acceptance letters on one side of my desk and a positive pregnancy test on the other.
Ooh.
And it was really hard to see, how do these two things come together in a way that I can actually make it, that we can actually make it. So it was really, really hard to see a future for us.
And that, you go into all the research about this, but that's not the typical situation of adolescent girls who get pregnant. I'm guessing. I've read a lot about this, but most of the time, I'm going to go ahead and throw out a generalization that when you're an adolescent and you get pregnant, you might not be necessarily the best student. Often you are, but you might not already have thought about college and had plans for that. What is it? Is it even fair to say typical? And how do we apply, policy and some of the solutions that you offer to adolescent girls who get pregnant and are, not necessarily even thinking about college yet? Because I'm guessing that's the problem. When you get pregnant, college is the last thing that you're thinking about.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what we have been taught to believe about teen pregnancy. Something that I really want people to take away from Pregnant Girl is that there are so many complexities to this issue and that there are so many challenges and difficult circumstances that are happening in the lives of most young people who find themselves in this situation long before the pregnancy, long before those two pink lines show up, right? They're living in poverty. They are dealing with housing insecurity, food insecurity. They may be going to these schools where there are few resources. There aren't role models in their family, their community, their neighborhoods of people who have gone to college, who have been successful. And so all of those things are happening way before a pregnancy comes into the picture. And I think what we often think is that you have these young people who everything is going great and I'm a wonderful student and, all of this is, great. And then I get pregnant and then life takes a turn for the worse. And that's actually not what's happening. We have to really start to peel back these layers and understand that there are these systemic issues that are happening for most young parents that where the pregnancy was a symptom of these larger issues. And that's where I think we're going to be able to make real change.
I'm just going to go back and forth to your personal experience and the book. What came next? You're looking at your table and you've got the college acceptance letters and the pregnancy test. What do you do?
So I had to take a few weeks just to gather thoughts and think about how am I going to share this news? The last thing I wanted to do was have to tell my parents, and I had to get the strength together to do that. And I also, just the way my mind works, was thinking I need to have a game plan to bring to them. How am I going to move forward? And so I shared it with my mom, and of course she was devastated. And I told her, no matter what, in 1 year, I'm going to go to college. And she said, you're crazy. Most mothers know how difficult something like that would be. And I said, no, I'm going to go to college. And I had no clue how I was going to do that. I didn't have tuition money. I didn't have book money. Shortly after I told my parents, I was living place to place with my daughter's father. I was pregnant. He was dealing drugs. Nothing about my life said college. So it was a promise that I made without really knowing if it was something that I could do.
How did you what was the driving force? Did you have did your parents end up supporting you on this? How much help did you have? Because I think the answers to those questions are not necessarily always representative of most young people who are pregnant and want to go to college. I mean, resources, outlets, just people to talk to are the most important. And it seems like you had a pretty good family, but in this situation, what was, what motivated you? What inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much on my own. I remember getting the acceptance letter to the College of William and Mary. I was 8 months pregnant, living in a Motel 6 day to day.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing indicated that I was actually going to make it to college. But I think like every parent, like we want the best for our kids. We want to give them the world. And in the darkest moments, those most difficult days, that's what motivated me. I'm like, I haven't even held this baby yet, but I know that she's going to need, the best of me. And she's going to need me to go to college and to get my degree.
So this was 20 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
It seems like so much has changed. The statistics around adolescent pregnancy, you've got all kinds of, advances in technology with birth control and so on. But my understanding is that it's gone way, way down. But how much has changed in the last 20 years around the issue, and then more specifically around the issue that you write so much about, which is being a parent and wanting to go to college, a young parent especially. How much has changed?
So there are some things that have changed. I think one thing is, even at the time that I got pregnant in the 90s, teen pregnancy was actually on the decline. The highest rates of teen pregnancy were in the 1950s, which is completely opposite of what, I thought at the time that I got pregnant. I think most of us think of it as this heightened crisis. And a lot of that has to do with kind of political agendas and the framing of these issues and policies. But the other things what hasn't changed is that certain communities are disproportionately impacted by this. And you touched on this earlier. We know that Black girls, for example, are 2 times more likely to get pregnant as teenagers than their white peers. And so we're still seeing that certain communities are disproportionately impacted by this, and that there's a lot of work to be done there. I think around the college piece of this, at the same time that you have pregnancy rates declining for teens, you have the cost of college skyrocketing. And so you are seeing where it's becoming more and more difficult to go to college as your average, young person, never mind if you're parenting and you have the additional responsibility of providing for a child.
Yeah. I mean, in reading the book, and I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine any person, especially if they don't have, a partner along with it, or partners, a family, getting through this, because bottom line is money. And you talk a lot about why that's an issue. And you just mentioned it, the cost of college. But you also make really clear that you were so focused. And I've heard this so many times from people. I'm fortunate that I've never quite been in this situation. I've never been in this situation, because even when I wouldn't take $1 from my parents, had a minimum wage job while I was putting myself through school, I shouldn't use that phrase, putting myself through school, because I knew that if I needed it, my parents would bail me out. Most people don't have parents like that. Let's be clear. But just trying to get through the day in terms of planning where you're going to get your next meal from, much less your kid, you would go without meals. That's not uncommon, sadly, in our country. How do you deal with the money issue? And just, we rarely talk about, college, because who would even consider going to college while you have a young kid at home? You can't afford that. And eat, Nicole, as you learn. Tell me about it.
I mean, yeah, definitely days I remember subsisting off of a granola bar and being in class and being sleep deprived because, you are up all night studying, because that's the only time that you can study when you have a child. So you're tired, you're hungry, and you've got to pick up that little one from a daycare that you can't afford and, bring them home, get them fed, bathed, and do it all over again the next day. And, I remember even going to the supermarket just to get like $20 worth of groceries, having my daughter in the cart, going and pushing the cart up to the cash register and having my card declined, and pushing her out into the parking lot and not knowing how we were going to eat that night. And these are things that should not be happening. I think college needs to be an option for anyone who wants to go. And certainly if you have a child, there's even more incentive to make that doable for you, because the next generation really, needs to see their parents being successful. The work that we do at Generation Hope is about both parent and child and setting that child up for success as well.
I imagine that, I don't know you, but I imagine that you probably get pretty upset and outraged by all types of assumptions about, women and black women. But I suppose, I'm guessing that the thing that probably upsets someone like yourself the most is when you hear the arguments made about personal responsibility, especially when it comes to sex and pregnancy and all of that. We hear so often that people, they have free will, they make choices. Why weren't you just more responsible? Why did you have sex? Why then did you have sex? Did you have, the conversation about abortion and birth control, you had a kid, why weren't you just more responsible, more personally responsible, when in fact your whole life has been about personal responsibility? What do you say to people when you hear that kind of argument?
Well,
sorry for all the assumptions. I get pinged on that a lot. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, I think it's spot on. And in growing this organization over the past 10 plus years, it's a question that we constantly get. And what I want people to understand is that for most young people, for every young person that we've ever supported through our organization, again, there were things going on in their lives that were incredibly difficult to navigate way before a teen pregnancy. We have children, young people who grew up in the foster care system, young people who lost a parent to death or incarceration. They had parents who might have been addicted to drugs. We've had young people in our program who've been molested and raped. And so to tell those young people that they now shouldn't be able to go to college is, I think, really difficult once people start to really understand what's going on.
There's also all kinds of stuff tied up just about sexuality and sex and wanting to be desired and the responsibility of like feeling that when you get pregnant, that you finally have a purpose as a teenager when you've been through so much trauma. My mom was a public city school teacher in Syracuse, New York. And I remember her telling me this I'm like, why would a young girl get pregnant, want to be pregnant? It's like, you don't understand. Sometimes they have nothing and it gives them a purpose. And I just remember hearing that. Go, wow, that's I never would have thought of something like that. But people don't think of things like that because you only look at life through your own experience, not through others. But your book, Pregnant Girl, does such good work to help us understand life through your eyes, and your organization does such good work advocating for people who have had similar experiences, which are all obviously unique to them. But you do such great work helping people navigate through college and getting into college and affording college. And I want to talk more about that, obviously. But what do you really hope those of us who haven't had your experience, don't think about your experience? I'm hoping my daughters don't have unwanted pregnancies, but if they do, I'll be better for reading your book. Nonetheless, what do you hope for people that don't share your experience to get from this unflinching memoir that you've written?
I want people to really challenge those assumptions that they have. I'm hoping that after you read this book, that you start to think differently about teen pregnancy and about young parents, about their potential. And the reality is each of us has an opportunity to do something to help young families, whether it's in your church or your neighborhood, your family, your community, your school, whether you're at the K through 12 level or you're in higher ed, we all have the ability to remove barriers for this population and to say, hey, they deserve an opportunity to go to college, to graduate from high school, and to provide for their families.
We touched on race a little bit, but this is a huge issue. We've got to talk about it, and always never want to disregard, in this case, white women who get pregnant when they're young. It's really obviously you talk about all the issues that affect young women in these cases, but in terms of enrolling into colleges and universities across the country, and obviously the cost of it, systemic racism is so alive and well. When people talk about racism and put that word ahead of it, I often think of higher education, much less early childhood education, and why that's actually a real determining factor. But how important is the conversation around racism when it comes to young black women trying to get into college and afford it?
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to the Black welfare queen, right? Like that.
I'd rather not, but we have to.
Right. I think if you want to talk about race, we have to go there,
Got
right?
to. It's the biggest. It was a huge. It was a seminal
in terms
moment.
of policy reform for cash benefit programs. And what ended up happening is, creating this image of a welfare queen, which we all know was a Black woman, a Black mother, taking advantage of the system. And we, quote unquote, have to fight against that. And so what ended up happening was, you put TANF in place and you disincentivize education.
TANF is the welfare.
Right. Exactly. Temporary assistance for needy families. Yep. Right. So it disincentivized recipients to be able to go to college because you don't get any credit for sitting in a college classroom. You only get credit for going to work. And so what ended up happening is you're working these low wage jobs so that you can get cash benefits, and you can't go to college because the time you spend studying and in a college classroom won't allow you to be able to get those benefits. And so we have to look at all of these various policies that are really about gatekeeping resources and keeping resources out of the hands of certain communities of color, that make it really difficult, if not impossible, for you as a individual and as a mother or a parent to go and get a post-secondary credential. And we all have to be honest about the power of a post-secondary credential, the earning power that it creates. It's not a magic wand, but it's a totally different ball game when you have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and you go out to go get a job.
It's as close to a magic wand as we can get for determination of success in America, and except if you go back to the early childhood education issue, which is so important. But yeah, I mean, how do you take on? Are you still there, Nicole? I just lost. Hey, you there, Nicole?
Yes.
I think my entire internet just went down for the last. It's literally never happened.
I was actually nervous. I'm like, maybe it was me.
No, it just said your internet is gone, and then it added that you and your podcast are a failure. I was like, what kind of a freaking Verizon message? I was like, did somebody? Verizon hates me.
The universe is telling you something.
It ended though. It literally, you had just finished your question or your answer, and so I can totally edit it out. And I have two more, I think, big questions for you. So so sorry about that. No one will notice except for you and the horrible people they're all big Reagan supporters apparently. Talking about, well, I don't think you mentioned Reagan.
I should have never said that. Yeah.
Okay, so my next big question was simply about the idea of, I like to talk about public policy a lot, and so much would change if we would just give people more government assistance. So much government assistance has been cut. There's so many myths around this. You just busted the one about the welfare queen. But the idea that there's so much fraud and that it creates, by the way, a lack of motivation and people become reliant on that. And you point to the 1 out of 100 people who are doing that and make the rules and the laws around that, when in fact, so much of this is just about giving people money. What would be better for society if we gave young women, especially young women of color, more assistance in terms of housing and education? How much of that are you advocating for? And how much of that do you think this new Biden administration is actually going to put in, whether it be the infrastructure bill or any other piece of legislation, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working on our policy and advocacy agenda as an organization right now. And if I could just sum it up with two things, it would be make it easier for people to move out of poverty and make it easier for people to overcome racial oppression. If we could use those two guiding lights in our policy creation at every level, then what a wonderful country we would be living in right now. That's not happening. And so I think one is exactly as you said, putting resources in the hands of people who need it without conditions and really trusting them. A lot of this goes back to trust, and it's, it's really about who deserves support and who doesn't. Many times we're thinking people coming out of racialized communities of color, Black and brown folks don't deserve and cannot be trusted with resources. And we have to name that racist kind of policy making and how it's holding our entire country back. I want to see things like free college. I want to see student loan forgiveness. Black parenting college students are at the epicenter of the student loan crisis. They have the most student debt of any other student group. So we really want to see real advances and investments that make it easier for people to, again, overcome the many challenges that have been put in their way, that we have put in their way.
Yeah, I mean, it's I hate that it's painted as radical. Like every other civilized country in the world has these policies, these types of assistance, and they don't have nearly the issues that we do with poverty, and we haven't even gotten to race and racism yet. Your organization, the book is so important and so good. Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. But your organization that you're the founder and CEO of is called Generation Hope. You've referenced the work before, but what is it that you guys do, and why should we support it and learn more about it? And maybe an anecdote here of a success story, Nicole. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's easy. I started Generation Hope in 2010 in my husband's man cave, very humble beginnings. I did not have Bill Gates knocking at my door and saying, I love your idea. Like, let's do this. And so really built it brick by brick. And the organization, I wanted it to exist in the world because there aren't enough organizations that exist that are doing this work, helping teen parents become college graduates, not only in the DC region where we're located, but across the country. So our core programming is helping more DC area teen parents become college graduates. We also, you talked about the importance of early childhood education. We also help their children get ready for kindergarten at the same time. So it's a 2-gen kind of solution to helping families move out of poverty. And now we're also launching this national work to advocate for the needs of parenting college students all across the country. About 1 in 5 undergraduate students across the country is parenting. And so we think, hey, we can be a real leader in this work and help institutions and policymakers make it easier for them to get to the graduation stage. A success story, very easy. We have so many. I think about Yaslin, who I feature in the book. She came to this country young with her mom and her sister from El Salvador. And really from a young age had to help be a breadwinner in her family. I think she was 9 years old and she was selling different dishes that she cooked out at the soccer field and in her neighborhood in the apartment complex to bring in money for her family. And then, by high school, she was working at McDonald's. She had earned her DACA status, which is, the dreamers status that we all have heard about in the news. And that allowed her to get a job. But that job was really about, again, how to help her mother pay the bills. The family had grown by that time. She was also working as a janitor at night. And again, having to go to school on top of that. She became pregnant and ended up running into someone who said, hey, you should think about college, and was willing to pay for her to take a course at a community college. And through that course, she just really excelled. And I think it planted a seed for her that maybe college was actually possible. She found our program. We were able to provide additional support and mentoring and really wrap her with those resources that we know are really important to getting her to the graduation stage. And now she is literally graduating next month from the University of Maryland and just purchased her first home with her husband. So,
That's amazing.
Wonderful example of what can happen when we do this work.
Do you have any idea about her immigration status? Because that is one of the most, horrible situations in America, the DACA people. Do you have any idea what if she married or what's changed? Because those people are it's horrible.
Yeah, she's still navigating the DACA status and has had a lot of uncertainty, as so many of our students. We have other students in our program who are dreamers, and it's been a scary past 4 years for sure.
The scariest. I mean, the scariest thing in the world I learned is uncertainty. And what's worse than that kind of like a citizenship uncertainty? And she's sitting here doing everything she possibly can to succeed, and she has, and yet she still has to be concerned about that. It's just horrific.
And she's a parent, and I think that we don't talk about that enough in this conversation about DACA and dreamers. It's like you have a child that's looking to you for answers and stability, and how rough and difficult is it for you to not be able to provide that? And that's
a lot of the dreamers are coming of that age that they would have kids, and so now you have 2 generations in limbo. It's just terrible. How's your daughter?
She's great. She's literally a couple months away from her own college graduation. So it has come full circle for us. And she is just doing really well and has a very clear vision for her career and what she wants to do. And it's just been wonderful to like go through the process of college through her, through her experience. And it's funny because she never complains to me because every time she gets ready to complain, she's like, oh my God, I can't talk to you about this because you did this with a baby. And so,
oh, that's so great that she has that perspective. I wish that I could learn how to give that to my daughter, who thinks she's in her own world. It's Julia's world, by the way. No one else is in it and has ever had any experiences. Right. Oh, that is so great to hear. She must be pretty impressed with you, and especially with this book.
Yeah, she is. She's very supportive.
That's so cool. So great to talk to you. Good luck with the book. And whenever you want to join me here on the podcast, talk about these issues, I'd love to talk to you again. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. What did I tell you? Wasn't she great? Nicole Lynn Lewis, Generation Hope. Get her new book right now, linked in the show notes. But it's Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. Follow her on Twitter. Let her know you heard her here. It's always such an important thing to do is reach out to the guests and say, I enjoyed listening to your conversation with Pete Dominick on Stand Up, or whatever the hell you want to say. Thank you very much for listening today and every day. Looking forward to hearing from you. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And that's all I've got for you. And now, time to take it away by Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter, one of our favorite members of the stand-up community. Take it away with Stand Up, John Carroll.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. Alright, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run there.